How's everybody doing? The music is quite loud for me. I can see that it's not for anybody else, though. Pretty soon we'll be doing away with the music. So I wanted to look at some of the Stop Killing Games stuff. And I looked around for it. I'm also still getting used to a new setup here, where I've got two different chats open and a web browser. And I had to go through. I haven't streamed the saggingrufus channel in like forever. So I had to like disable a bunch of stuff that doesn't work right now. Because I don't have a chat bot. Yeah, we're gonna chill here for a second, and then we'll get right to it. There we go. We'll get our page up here. Just making sure that everything worked. I'm live on Twitch. I'm live on YouTube. Both. Let's see. Well, yeah, YouTube's working. Good, perfect. Perfect. I've successfully multi-stream. Okay. And both my chats. Good. So. I've got too many windows, man. This one is going to live up here. On the up above monitor, because my monitors are vertically stacked. There. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Stop Killing Games. It's an initiative going on in the EU right now. We're going to watch a couple videos on it, and we're going to read some stuff about it. But I don't want to start by explaining it in my own words. I figured let's start by going right to the source. So Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement that started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games that they have sold to people. So destroying meaning that due to no fault of the consumer, the game is completely not playable anymore. So for instance, one example of this would be if you were to log in to an online server for verification. So like you have to have an account with X provider in order to play this game kind of thing. If that company were to cease to exist and you couldn't authenticate, so you couldn't log into your account, you wouldn't be able to play the game. That's one example of this. This is saying that they want to challenge that. They don't think that should be legal. It shouldn't be legal for you to buy something that just will not function in the future. Similar to if you bought a physical video game, like if you bought a Switch 1 cartridge, and then when the Switch 2 came out, your Switch 1 cartridge just ceased to function, like they just expired it somehow. That's what that would be like for a physical game. Or just at some indeterminate time in the future, the cartridge just doesn't work anymore, no matter how well you kept it. It just stops working. They say that an increasing number of games are effectively sold as goods with no stated expiration date. Very true. Every time I buy a game, it does not say the game is only good until this date. It's not a service I'm paying for. It's a game I'm purchasing, right? But in reality, It's designed to be completely unplayable as soon as any support from... Yeah. But designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. So basically, by design, again, this login server idea. So, an increasing number of games are sold effectively as goods with no stated expiration date, but designed to be completely unplayable as soon as support from the publisher ends. If I don't have my login server, I can't play the game anymore. This practice is a form of planned obsolescence. Yes, it is. If it's a game that requires something that won't always be there, they plan to someday get rid of the game. It's not only detrimental to customers, but makes preservation effectively impossible. Furthermore, the legality of this practice is largely untested in many countries. So what they're saying is they want to bring forth an initiative to say, let's look at this and see if that should be legal. Should I be able to sell you something that I can revoke at any time, but sell it under the guise of a purchase that you can keep forever? So this has been a thing for about a year, and they've escalated complaints in France, Germany, and Australia, and they've brought forth petitions in other countries, including Canada. As of 2025, most consumer actions on this matter have concluded. Yep. Or they're waiting to hear back. So we can actually take a look at this. This is all the stuff they've done. So I've actually looked at some of this already. The UK, France, Germany, Australia, Canada. I did look at it. We got less than 10,000 signatures. It was like 8,000, I think. Sponsored by Elizabeth May, 8,000. Basically what they said, if you summarize it, is they believe it's up to the provinces. We had 8,000 signatures. That's not nearly enough. So, yeah, it wasn't going to happen here. They have a complaint submitted in the US and in Brazil for this game called The Crew. The Crew is a game with cars, and essentially Ubisoft had licenses on the cars from the dealers for like which cars they were allowed to portray, and when that contract was over, they discontinued the game. Maybe that's not the exact sequence of events, but that all happened at the same time, so it's not crazy to believe that they just didn't want to renew the contract, because they probably weren't making any money on the game anymore because they had released several sequels. So they've got complaints, no response, but they expected no response. This one failed. Ours was a dead end because of probably the provinces thing. Decision pending. France is still ongoing. If you're from France, you can sign whatever they want here. Same with the UK. But yeah, it's largely the EU that they're trying to get signatures in. So before they started this, so it's been going on for a while, but as of a week ago, the founder put up a new video talking about how it's largely failing, and since then it's received like 200,000 in like the last 7 days. So that's that part's pretty good. So the unfortunate part is that's most of their website. They have an FAQ here. So we can go over a few of them. We've talked about how publishers are destroying games. Why should people care? Well, I mean, you've bought it, right? Like, this is going to boil down to they sold it to you as a product that you could keep. You don't get to keep it. Other things don't work that way. Video games probably shouldn't either. And the only reason that it works this way is because the law isn't caught up with technology. So if a company faces penalties for destroying games they've sold, that's the thing. It's not that they can't do it; they just have to pay a penalty. So it could still happen. But this was the one I really wanted to read here. That's why I got confused. Aren't you asking companies to support games forever? No. And we're not saying that because, or not we're there. They're not saying that because the game has an online functionality that Sony has to pay servers to maintain their game forever. What they're saying is when Sony decides that they are no longer an option, they're not going to pay to keep that server up anymore, that they release a way for the player base to continue to play their game. Now, this is just an initiative, so like there's no bounds to it. They're just illustrating a problem that they've noticed, which is that sometimes taking down that server completely destroys the ability to play the game itself. Other times, it's just like, oh, multiplayer matchmaking is broken, but that's okay because that was a very small portion of this game that nobody cared about. So this questions, are you really buying a game or a license? And there's a lot of legalese and it's largely unchallenged. Isn't the law on this already settled? Largely within the US, but not other countries. Exactly. Many existing laws were not written for a scenario where the seller destroys the product they sold to the customer. That again, it's that odd scenario where the Switch game that you bought, for some reason Nintendo sends out ninjas into everybody's house to destroy it because they don't want to upkeep the server. The physical thing is destroyed by the company for some reason. That's why there's no laws against that. So I've seen some stuff on this already, but Pirate Software like 10 months ago made some videos on this where he didn't like it because he didn't believe it to be feasible from a developer's perspective to leave these games in a functional, playable state. I don't think that's unreasonable. Mostly because we're going to watch the Pirate Software videos and he's going to infer a lot of things that you just wouldn't have to do. Because somebody might steal the game if you released a binary. Well, if somebody was going to break the law, they could already steal it and publish it. So we'll get into that in a minute. So he made this tweet a few days ago, apologizing, but not really backing down from his original opinion. It wasn't a mistake. He believes it. That's fine, but that this would be more or less unreasonable to ask of a developer team of a live. We'll watch his videos, but I believe it's for mainly live service games. So he believes it to be too high of a burden and that overall it'll just restrict the video game industry so much that nobody will want to play the games anymore. So let's pause our music here. And here we go. We're going to pause our music here. And this was the first video about it, the Stop Killing Games. The reason I'm going to show them in this order is we're not going to watch the whole thing, but we've also got this video from the creator that addresses these videos. We're not going to watch this large Pirate Software address part, but we're going to watch him talk about the initiative. But this is where a lot of people first hear about the initiative, is through Pirate Software. So the way he paints the picture for the audience could determine whether or not they're going to sign the contract. Or not the contract, geez, the petition. Will they sign the EU petition? Well, it's going to depend on how they feel about it. They watch a video that speaks negatively of it. They may not. So let's see what Pirate Software has to say, and we'll see if I agree with what he believes.
Hi, my name is Jason Thor Hall, also known as Pirate Software Online. I've been in the gaming industry for about 20 years. I used to work at Blizzard Entertainment, then Amazon Game Studios, and now I own my
We're going to turn that down.
Software by the same name, which is an indie studio, and I've
So,
been here for about 8 years now. I also run a massive community. We've got about
we're not just going to sit and
180,000
watch the
people on
whole
Discord,
thing. I
and
want to
most
get
of what I do is
to
try
where he
teach other
talks
people how to
about
make
some of
games,
the stuff.
teach them that they can make games, show them the tools to do so, and try to do everything without it.
Unfortunately, he left no
Has the tools to do so,
timestamps.
so their medium doesn't die out. And
Okay.
it never will. And that's the whole intention of all of this. And even if I could. And I'm going to kind of go through this in conversation. The reason why I have a problem with Stop Killing Games is specifically it starts the wrong conversation. If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future, this ain't it. And the reason why is specifically on this initiative, under its own description, it says, this initiative calls to require publishers that sell or license video games to consumers in the European Union or related features and assets sold for video games they operate to leave said video games in a functional playable state. Specifically, the initiative seeks to prevent the remote disabling of video games by the publishers before providing reasonable means to continue functioning of said video games without the involvement from the side of the publisher.
So that's what we talked about a second ago. This part we're on the same page for, but he's going to tell us why he disagrees with doing this.
This isn't always possible in all video games.
Okay. That doesn't make it okay. Bad things happen. But so also things against the law happen. That doesn't mean that this should or shouldn't be against the law just because it could happen. They could also just make it a payable fine, or maybe they have to refund the purchase of the game at the end.
And it doesn't call out the specific practice that this is supposedly trying to defeat. It is incredibly vague and will damage all live service games.
It's not
How would
vague.
you keep League of Legends in a functional playable state?
You allow the community to host their own servers at the end. So it doesn't say that the game has to be functional playable state with no intervention and, one singular click you can have the game going again. You would have to find a way to host the infrastructure. Whatever that ran on, you're going to need to find a way to acquire. I don't think this has to be ridiculous, like, oh, you just have to click on this one icon and that's a functional playable state. That doesn't have to be the case at all. Here's the server binary. By the way, you're going to have to sign up for AWS on your own, and then you're going to have to set up the server and run it. That would be functional and playable, and someone else would have to do it. You could even include in the legislation that people can't make money off it. They can only host free servers. You could even go that far.
You'd have to re-architect the entire game.
No, you wouldn't. See, this is where we're making a huge assumption here that it has to be easy enough that any consumer can just do it. No, they have to leave a way for that to happen, for the community to pick it up and keep going with it. It doesn't mean that every single player has to be able to just click a button and have a server running. There may be more work that needs to be done, but you just have to provide the thing that would run on that server that they'll set up.
The game is what is called client-server. So in client-server models, there's a server and there's a client, and all of the math, all of the game, everything happens on the server.
Not always. Depends on the game. But either way, you can provide the server file, and you can still set up the client-server thing and not re-architect anything.
The client just displays it. And the reason we want to do it that way is so that you can't teleport around and do 1 billion damage. You don't trust the client. You trust the server. The client just displays what it's told.
This doesn't matter.
So if we wanted to re-architect
for the
this,
discussion,
we have to take all of that server logic, push it back out into the client, and
don't
somehow
have
make
to
that
do that
playable in a multiplayer-only video game. That doesn't make sense to me. So this isn't going to work for all games. Why?
That's not a solution that we're looking at. No one's suggesting that that happened. Like that's something that was he came up with that. That's not mentioned anywhere. That like we looked at their website, it's very short because the objective is just to start the conversation and to look into how these practices work so that we can come to a solution. What's being said here, I guess I'm on this side now. But what we're saying is the game has to be playable, which means if there is a server that's required, then there has to be a way for people to run the server. There has to be a way for someone to continue to use it. It doesn't mean that it has to be as easy to run as it was when they first purchased it. It means that there has to be an option for them to maybe the server only runs on Windows 2000. That's something they will have to figure out if they want to run a Windows 2000 VM to run this server. It doesn't mean that it has to be fully compatible with the latest up-to-date hardware and everything has to be super easy for the consumer. It means that there has to be a way for them to attempt to do this on their own and not just have nothing.
Is it calling out all games? And it's really easy to say like, oh, that'll get worked out down the line. But we're dealing with government here. If we're going to be putting up these types of ideas specifically in front of government, we need to be calling out the right issues.
This is the right issue. It's just that that's not the only way to solve the issue. But if we wait until we have the whole entire thing figured out before we start, we'll never start because the question's going to keep changing. So like you need enough information to start. And the process is going to take forever to get through. You can figure it out while you go and say, look, we've identified a problem and we realize that we need a solution. But you don't need to know immediately what that solution is. Part of going down this road might open an investigation into what the best way to solve it is.
Especially if you don't have precedent set. Because now you're going to be setting precedent on something that doesn't make any sense.
Well, no, because it would have to be passed as a law first, and you would have to draft the law. So it doesn't just like immediately you start the conversation and then immediately you're in this spot where you're setting precedent. There's years worth of steps in the middle, but that all starts with a conversation. And I think the conversation needs to start broad because you'll narrow it in as you go. You don't start from the smallest minute situation and slowly incorporate things by building out. You cast a wide net and then talk about what the exceptions are going to be. Like one exception might be if you're playing a game like Pokemon Go, where the game is free and you're only buying things in the game, then they just have to make it clear that you can't get any of this stuff and it's just for as long as the app runs. Versus a game that you purchase and then it stops working. So it can be talked about. And we can come up with different scenarios for different things. But until we actually look at the issue, we can't start.
With people that may not understand the nuance of our industry, all in the name of saving games. I can't agree with that. So let's go into why this is happening, right? So why did this start in the first place? What is the specific cases they've called out that are egregious? And they have one. It's the crew. So actually...
Well, I think there's more than one. I think the other ones, however... they're probably too not recent enough. The crew is the biggest one for sure, and it's the easiest target, and it's really recent. So there are plenty of games that don't work. It's not that there's only one. We can Google a list after we watch this, and I think the last list I saw there was 700. That's enough to start looking into it.
On The Crew. The video game The Crew, published by Ubisoft, was recently destroyed for all players and had a player base of at least 12 million people.
Here we go.
Due to the game's size and France's strong consumer protection laws, this represents one of the best opportunities to hold a publisher accountable for this action. If we're successful in charges being pressed against Ubisoft, this can have a ripple effect on the video games industry to prevent publishers from destroying more games.
Right, so it's not that this is their only... It's not that this is the only one. This is a really strong case that needs to be acted on quickly. If quick change is to start.
First off, I don't like the idea in this that it has a player base of 12 million people. That is not how long-running games work. There is a large number of people that buy the game, and that player base slowly dwindles off until nobody is playing it anymore. If there's any costs associated with keeping the game online, which this was an online video game, then eventually it costs more to keep it online than it does to keep running it.
That's a fair point. It costs more to keep online than what they're bringing in revenue for it. Okay. And saying that it has a player base of 12 million people, that might be a huge stretch. There may have only been 200 people playing it, but there's still 12 million people who are out that purchase and can no longer play the game, which I believe is what we're probably talking about here. It's not that 12 million people played it all the time, it's that 12 million people are affected by this game no longer working at all.
Right? So the cost outweighs the amount of income for it. There are bad business practices that can occur in there. There are companies that will sell a online-only game as a single-player experience and kind of just put it into the TOS and play it. But not all.
Not a single-player experience. There are games that it's not explicitly known that the game will not work if the server goes offline. It's not immediately clear at time of purchase. So again, this is why we need to cast a wide net when we're trying to come up with an initiative like this. It doesn't have to completely solve the issue. Perhaps the issue is just in communication. That could also be, like, maybe the definition of game right now is too wide and these can't be classified as games, and that's a potential solution. These have to be called something else that is very clearly another product that's not a game. You're not purchasing it. You're purchasing a chance to participate in a server for as long as that may be.
Companies do that. When they do, we should be calling out that specific company, not all companies. So let's take a look at this and find out more about the crew itself. And if we pull up their Wikipedia, we can see that the
Okay, so we're going to talk about the crew for a while. We can skip most of that probably.
Specific about the business practice it's trying to
I don't think we need to talk about the crew.
defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not to Ross, otherwise known as Accursed Farms, the creator of this initiative, and one of the ones that's pushing it the most online. I'm going to let him say exactly why he thinks that this will go through very easily and why it is important, and then I'm going to tell you why I don't agree with it.
Okay.
Becomes law in the EU? Yeah, it might be. Now, it's not a guarantee, but I think if we get the signatures, this passes. Why do I say that? Well, it's a few factors. Politicians like easy wins, and this doesn't require them to do much at all. And unless it involves gambling or protecting children, politicians generally don't care about video games. So this isn't of big consequence to them or most of their constituencies.
I'm going to stop it there for a moment. The assertion that politicians just like easy wins, so this legislation will go through, but the politicians don't care about a multi-billion-dollar global industry and that it doesn't matter to their
Okay. So this is the reason why he won't agree to companies destroying purchases. I care more about the consumer in this instance, I think.
constituencies is incredibly absurd to me. I don't think this is the right direction at all for a movement like this. I think it's incredibly damaging.
I think that's
and makes our entire
motivation.
industry look bad. Both.
I think that's the motivation for people to sign it, though. It's that you can make a difference by signing this because it's not just going to get kicked out and not happen. It's if you're on the fence about it, you're like, oh, I might do that later. You might do it now so you don't forget. I don't think it's the reason. Like, this is going to take a lot of time and effort to put through. So even if it's an easy win, the whole legislation still has to be drafted and figured out. So there's still a lot of work left.
Both on the player side and the developer side. If we're going to be putting forward anything that may eventually turn into legislation, it should be passing because it's the right thing to do for consumers and developers, and that there's some...
Well, developers are just people who work for companies or develop their own games. If they're developing their own game, they can solve this by releasing a server binary or by not making the game absolutely require that. Like, you could make a local, how do I describe this? So when you're developing things, you normally have a local development environment where you like deploy things and do things. I guarantee you that these games all have one of those for their developers to test. So it's not that it's non-trivial, it's that if you want to sell a game that's completely crippled by going offline, you have to invest in that in some way. And if you're not going to publish a server binary, that's your choice. That's one way you could solve that problem, but it's also a zero cost way to do that. You're taking the game offline. The law is there to protect you against copyright infringement of other people selling your product. So why can't we put that binary out there if people aren't allowed to profit from it? The company's decided that they don't want to do it. I don't get your argument.
Kind of a middle ground, not just because it's an easy win and politicians don't care. This sets us off on a completely wrong foot.
EU law is already unclear on a lot of this practice anyway.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous. If we're going
Well, no. It's not dangerous. It's not dangerous to research and look into. What's written here isn't going to become the law. And again, we cast a wide net so that we can figure out where the gaps are, so we're going to narrow it as we go. You don't start with something so minute that nobody can relate to it. You have to start with a broad brush, and I'd say it's not even just video games, it's software as a whole. So like, cast the net even wider. Stop Killing Games is great, but software needs to be protected, not just games.
Going to be setting precedent, which could change the way that law
And this
works
won't
all the
set
way down the
precedent
road,
until
and we
it
need to be
becomes
sending
law.
the right message, which this is sending a vague message that doesn't cover the actual problem. So this is not a win.
It shouldn't cover anything. It's to start to have the right people look into it to figure it out.
To me, this is a huge risk.
And we would be
It's
making
not a
it
risk.
easy for them to settle it. It falls in line with other consumer practices. You know how when you buy something, you're generally allowed to keep it?
In the case
Yep.
of live service games, in the terms of service for those, you are not buying the game.
So I don't know the exact laws, but I know that there are laws that say that you can't expect consumers to consent to things that are unreasonable. It doesn't sound super reasonable to say that if you buy a game, you can't run it later. It's different. And I think if they were to do a study, they would find that it's different for you to be playing an online game and buying in-game things, because you didn't buy the game, you bought the cosmetics. And at the end of the day, that's where I was kind of talking earlier about, like, saying that these aren't games, they're separate things, and whatever happens over here don't affect the legal construct of game. Live service games, if you have to buy the game, then yes, they should have to provide a way for you to keep playing the game. If you're just paying to access a server and you're buying things inside that server, then again, maybe that's not a legal term for game. Maybe that's a legal term for something else. And it's very known to the consumer up front what they are getting into, not that it's a game and have this wide definition that means anything and everything.
You're buying a license to the game. And that's the
You're
part
not-
that's really different here. If we don't
You're not really buying a license to the game, because the license can be revoked for no reason in some cases. I would say you're buying the privilege to connect to a specific server set. Like, you don't even really have you have a license that you have no control over, zero control over.
Like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
Again, there is law already that says that consumers can't consent to things that are unreasonable, especially when it's not clearly stated anywhere what you're actually paying for. It's intentionally vague.
But if we're under this weird idea that we need to get rid of all live service games, or
that's something that was never said. Again, you can, if you were to go with what my most extreme example would be, we're talking about distributing server binaries. We're not, oh, I clicked the thing. We're not talking about re-engineering, re-architecting, or like making things impossible. It's that these games run on things already, and it doesn't have to be just plug and play. Maybe they have to do work and they have to actually get other software and run them in a specific way, but that could still be passable because there's a way to do it, as opposed to just game go offline, never again can you ever touch it.
damage that practice in any way to keep in line with consumer policies, it is in line with consumer policies. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be there in the first place. So this doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. You're not buying the game, you're buying a license to the game.
Hardly. And it's also not well laid out that that is what you're buying.
In the niche cases where a studio is trying to sell a game as if you are buying it or purchasing it or using that language specifically, and they give you a live service game instead, I agree that should.
No, so like, just make it abundantly clear that if you have to buy access to the game and it's not a service that's monthly, like, I guess just put it out there like that. If you buy the game, like in the case of World of Warcraft, where you have to buy the game and then pay monthly to play, that's, just make that distinct and different than just paying per month to get onto the server. But again, you need an initiative like this to start looking at it. You can't just immediately have the answer. You have to look at where the edge cases are, and you have to figure out what this is actually going to target and what it's not.
Should change. That language should change. You are not purchasing the game. You are not buying the game. You are paying to have a license to a live service experience. I get that. Is that what this is doing, though? The initiative is not trying to call that.
It shouldn't lean either way. It's just saying that games have to be in a functional, playable state. It doesn't say that a live service game in its current state should be considered a game. Again, kind of what I said earlier, I think we're making assumptions and then not asking questions.
Let out specifically. It's trying to say that all games need to stay in a functional, playable state, which is not calling out the language that is being used to manipulate.
It could, though, if what was and what was not a game, if the language changed, then this would still be correct. So if we're talking about changing language, depending on which way you change that language, it's different. So like if a live service game can't be called a game anymore, then you just have to worry about distributing server binaries, which you could also do as a live service game. You could still distribute your server binaries and be compliant.
Manipulate the player. Call that out specifically, not this vague bullshit.
And finally, this is a diversion from really serious topics that politicians would prefer not to deal with.
That's really gross to me as well. The idea that this is just a diversion from serious topics and they can get an easy win in and we can just push it through and there won't be a lot of pushback on it and they're not going to have to think about it too hard. That's crazy dangerous, dude. If you're going to be setting precedent, if you're going to be putting forward something that you want to start a conversation to eventually become legislation, and these are the reasons for it, not only can I not agree with the initiative, but I can't agree with you. And I think that the tactics that you're using here are really disgusting. So yes, I won't agree with that. And I won't agree with Ross. There's no way around that.
Maybe I'm wrong. That just seems like you're trying to bolster your previous argument, and that I don't know that it would have mattered that much if you agreed on the main point.
I think
This is EU legislation and you live in the US. And I mean, I know that you're a developer, but I don't know that that would have been as strong of a point.
this is gross. To sum it all up, no, I will not be supporting the initiative Stop Killing Games. You're not going to change my mind on it because I find this language to be incredibly vague and damaging to the rest of our industry.
I don't see how it's damaging at all. There are many ways around it. One of them is to not make a game that is so reliant on a proprietary server that could not be replicated or ever set up again. And I just don't see a world where you can't meet the demand. Again, you don't have to re-architect anything. And you're doing it at end of life when you're done making money on the game.
I think that it will be bad for both developers and players down the line in the way that it is currently written. And I think that starting a conversation that doesn't get to the core of the issue is both wasted time and leads to potentially bad outcomes. So if we want to talk about this, let's talk about the actual bad business practices. In the case that a studio is making a live service game,
Okay.
and they sell it to you as a product, they say that you are purchasing the game or you are buying the game, when in reality you're actually
So this is similar to the World of Warcraft example that I brought up, where you buy World of Warcraft and then pay to play it.
purchasing or buying a license to that game. I think that we should be fighting about that. That needs to go away. A player should be well informed.
There are certain things that you shouldn't be allowed to consent to. Buying entry to pay to play should be one of those things that we just shouldn't allow as a practice. I shouldn't be able to buy a thing that I can't use because the company won't let me use it until I pay a fee.
At the point of purchase, that they are purchasing a license, not
Purchasing a license to what?
buying a game. And the reason that we have those licenses in the case of client-server interactions, like we had before, we're talking about client-server games, is so that they can ban you when you cheated them. They revoke your license. That's why they revoke your license.
Right, but just because you can't play on their server doesn't mean that you can't play at all, ever, anyway. Like, you bought the game. You didn't pay for the service. You bought the game. You bought a license to something. You shouldn't be allowed to buy something that you can't buy. If they can revoke it, then you didn't really buy it. It's not yours. So, like, it's not really that hard of a problem to solve. Release a server binary. Done. I still haven't really seen the downside to this. At end of service, we're not even talking about from day one. Like, sure, if you get banned while the game is still only allowed to be hosted by this exclusive group of people, that sucks to be you. But if you did buy the game and you did get banned, well, if that ever goes end of service, you can play again.
To protect the gameplay of every other player that you're impacting when you cheat at these games. That needs to exist, but it needs to be better informed to the player at time of purchase. So I agree on that. This doesn't bring that up, though. It just attacks all video games.
It doesn't attack video games. It questions whether or not consumers are able to make these types of choices and whether or not we should allow businesses to sell things that will not function. It's not punitive. It's asking a question.
That have online-only components and says that they need to keep being able to be played indefinitely. That doesn't make any sense to me. Aside from
It only doesn't make sense because you will only view it in one way.
that, a lot of people really like live service games as they exist now. So trying to kill off all live service games is some people.
That's not what's trying to be done here. Nobody's trying to cancel live service games. It's trying to ensure that the games can still be played because some people sink thousands of dollars into these.
Have said online doesn't make any sense either. Live service games are a great way to get away from the real world. They are about social interaction between players. Some people get married in them. Some people met their spouse in them and then got married in them. It's a really cool thing for a point in time in which you're having that social experience. And to destroy that just because you don't like them is very weird.
I've yet to see where it destroys them.
Don't think that makes a lot of sense to me. I also don't think it makes sense the way that Ross is posing this as why it's going to pass. I think that's incredibly inflammatory and could lead to a lot of damage to both what he's trying to stop and to games as a whole. To say that the government just doesn't care and this is an easy win and we're going to get it through is disingenuous. You're talking about a multi-billion-dollar global industry. To think
a multi-billion-dollar global industry that's ripping off its consumers. And that may be part of the reason how they're making multi-billion dollars. It might be by ripping off their customer with unfair business practices, which is why this exists. So I guess before we say that we're ruining everything, maybe we should do the investigative work to find out. I think is where a lot of people would sit on that.
Think that the government isn't going to be meticulously looking through this and looking for flaws and holes is absurd. So I don't think that's honest at all, and I find it disgusting. So for everyone who's mad about that, fine. Be angry about it. I'm not going to change my stance on that because I can't agree with this, both as a dev and a player. I see.
So this is the second part.
Thor Hall, also known as Pirate Suffer, and the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies.
Let's see how many of these can be changed to easy just by slightly altering the question.
And since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement of the initiative, which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state. Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well,
okay. Online-only live service game, which means the game runs on a server, and that's the only way it's runnable. Sounds like you need to release the server file.
If you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now. Some way to keep it functional and playable, right?
Yep.
Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this.
Yep.
But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the
Why?
reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse.
Open to abuse after they decided that they didn't want to host anymore. Because again, it's only when the game goes end of service. So is the proposal here that someone's going to purposefully tank your business and that then they can make money off of it? Because all you have to do is add in a clause for that and just say, okay, but no one's allowed to profit off it. It goes public domain or a special type of public domain where the servers that are used to host it can't profit off the IP that runs on the server.
So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right?
It's going to be something else. We're going to make a game. We're going to make the Krusty Krab simulator where people can, it is a live service game. You can either be someone who works at the Krusty Krab or you can be a customer at the Krusty Krab. And the only way that you can get money is by taking your turn working at the Krusty Krab. It's a very terrible game, but there's a lot of people on it all the time, and it only exists in the server.
Right. And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but
okay,
you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it.
Yes.
Right. So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state at end of life. So I hit you
at
with
end
a
of
ton
life.
Of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you. And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently.
You just make the law also include that they can't make money off it later.
The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something that is very easily attainable today.
Yep.
And let's say that this goes
You know
on
what
long
else is
enough
easily attainable? DDoS and good anti-cheat. It did happen. If it did happen in TF2 recently, so this was 10 months ago, I bet they fixed it. This would be on the server infrastructure, not, it's not a, it doesn't have to be because the game, like, I just don't see this. This is just a what if. What if somebody broke the law in order to sell my server binary? Well, what if somebody broke the law and was selling copies of your game? It's the same. It's no different.
your game dies because you can't afford it anymore, and your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional playable state.
Yep.
At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it.
And then you get sued and you lose because the laws protect against that.
People have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you want a government initiative to enforce that, that means the government has to build a registry of...
No, they don't. It's called a lawsuit. You just sue them civilly for all the money they made. It'll be an easy win because all of that will be captured online somewhere.
all of those games and all of that intellectual property that should...
And then if the company doesn't care, then they don't care about it. But it's the same as, remember those licenses we were talking about before? It's a license that they can't do that. And if they break that license, it's really no different than anybody breaking any other license. You go after them for it.
Shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that with no one owning it because those studios have shut down. That's going to be a massive burden.
And if the studios have shut down, I think at that point, do we really care? If the studio is shut down, do we really care about protecting the studio that doesn't exist anymore over the players that consumed that product?
Burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore? Is that just able to be monetized now? Again, this was obtained through abuse of the original creator.
Not necessarily. I mean, whoever would be the legal owner of that property could then go sue them. It just get passed down the same way other things do, other rights.
I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization, because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so.
No, it's still not legal. It's just as illegal. It's still just a giant what if. It makes it a little bit easier for someone to do that at end of life when you weren't running servers anyway. But this could still already happen. It's just that the server binaries are out there and you're more protected from a legal standpoint.
That's the problem. After putting this out publicly and talking to people about it, this specific scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations, I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. Well, you don't get to define what players get to play or not play.
Neither should the companies after they sell the game.
You also shouldn't be able to get to define what developers build or don't build. You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make any goddamn sense.
And they shouldn't get to control what's in ours. If I buy TF2, I should get to have that game. That doesn't sound wild to me.
Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it.
Nope. It's not a lot of risk. It's a little bit of risk and more legal security for if that thing were to happen, that you'd actually be able to attack the people who did it. So it adds a little bit more risk that that thing might happen, and then adds tons of protections for all the consumers and tons of protections for anybody trying to monetize things that ought not be monetized in the digital space. Because again, I'm not even thinking just games here. I'm thinking software digital goods in general.
Which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place. A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore.
What's the incentive now? Is the incentive being able to exploit people? Because if that's the incentive, then I would say that they shouldn't be around. If that's the incentive, which is just to exploit the consumer, then they probably shouldn't be around. But if that's not the point, then I think we're okay.
Which means you get less multiplayer live experiences.
Well, no, I don't see why people wouldn't continue to make them, because this doesn't really hurt you. This is something that sounds scary. If your game is going to get taken down by bots and exploits, it sounds like that's probably going to happen regardless. Like, people are going to do that with or without this law. The only difference is that the people who bought that game aren't screwed when your company goes under, because that's going to happen either way. This doesn't enable people to do that. They still wouldn't be able to make money off of it.
That sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoy going and playing in games in the past, at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run. And
like I said earlier, maybe those don't meet the legal definition of game, and it just has to be extremely clear up front to the person who's going to buy an in-game cosmetic for this free-to-play game what's happening. Maybe that's a legally distinct thing that can't be called a game anymore. And that's how that problem gets remedied. Not every problem has to be remedied by release the server files. I think you'd have to look into that and figure that out.
You shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to try to achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players.
This is where he kind of loses me. It's not aggressively attacking players. It's aggressively protecting consumers from an unfair business practice of selling things that can't be redeemed and then turning off the servers later and people having just wasted money
instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games.
I don't really understand how that's always allowed. So like there are preservations like for emulators for like a bunch of ROMs and stuff like that. But I don't understand how that works because it's not legal to download them. So I don't understand how the preservation side of that works if you can't distribute them.
For future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue that this isn't...
Unless it's my own local collection that I keep forever. I could see that, but... And some people are collectors and would like to do that.
Actually preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends.
So, well, let's see.
Require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch.
Right. And if you didn't have 10 people or however many you need to play that game, that sucks. You won't get to play it. You don't have to solve that problem with this. That's not the issue. The issue is if I do have 10 people and we all bought the game. Again, I know Apex Legends is more of an online service that you're paying to use. But again, this could be one of those situations where that's not a game anymore. That has to be something else.
People. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies? Or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state?
Well, you just want to show people later on, like, hey, this is how the game was. And again, if you can't get 10 people, you can't get 10 people. But you could still boot up something like WoW and go show people the different places. Especially, like, imagine earlier, I forget if it was this video or the one before, where he said some people met their partners in that game that they eventually marry. Imagine never being able to go back to those spots because Blizzard turns off World of Warcraft. Like, isn't that a kind of self-defeating to say that nobody would want it in that state, but then also say that these games are so important because of the memories attached to what happened in those games? It seems like it's just a useful argument in one side, but when you kind of examine it more closely, not so much.
That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is.
No.
You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense. That's not preservation. And for
well, you're not preserving the experience. You're preserving what you paid for.
those that may stop there and go, but private servers going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft. Again, we talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse of the developers. So that
that can already be abused with or without this, and probably are. But DDoS and anti-cheat and just getting good at detecting bots is making that less of an issue every day. We're getting better at this every day. Like to the point where we just kind of outright ban Linux users from some things just in case. Like this isn't new. And it's always been happening, and it won't happen anymore. Like it can't really happen any more than it happens now. It happens all the time. This is ubiquitous. This is just running a server. Like this is the reason why people don't self-host their own stuff, because of all this that could go wrong. It's already happening. So like this isn't a problem that's unique to this solution, where if you were to release the server binaries, this would happen. This is going to happen whether you do or you don't, at an extreme magnitude. It's happening all over the place, all the time. Anything that looks like it's even remotely open to connect to, this is happening to.
that is not a solution. And the last take that I got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this is an initiative. It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait. And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation.
No, I'm a developer, and I don't see this in the same way that you do it, because you're looking at it with a narrow scope. You're saying if they were to do this thing this one very specific way, I wouldn't like it, and because that's a possibility, no. Instead of saying I want to shape the conversation and I want to decide how this goes, let's move it forward and everybody look closely at it and let's figure it out. You're saying if it went this one way, I wouldn't like it, therefore, no.
It's not showing the trials and problems that this could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play. I don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't going to be able to speak on this.
It's not a developer issue. It's a definitions issue. And whether or not those companies should be making games in ways that can't be played ever again. And again, maybe those things just legally don't get to be called games anymore, and all the language around that has to change to be more clear what you're paying for in those instances. Maybe the age limit on those gets increased because kids can't consent to whatever those are. Maybe all that stuff happens. But that's not the focus. The focus is on figuring out where the gaps are and what problems actually do need to be solved.
Explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about. Doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is.
The petition is just asking to look at.
Currently written. I should be able to be talking about this. In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that...
It's just a shame that you talked about it in this very one narrow way that wasn't... It didn't seem to be the point of it all. It seems like you were very fixated on it impacting live service games in one specific way. But like, had you just considered that maybe those won't be called games anymore, and then that cuts out the whole live service portion of it? where the games are free to play and only exist online, or you pay to access a server but you don't buy the base game. And I mean, World of Warcraft could easily fix that by just not making you buy the base game anymore. But it seems like you just went super hard down this route that this is the only way it could be.
As a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years, this is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So
I didn't know Thor was that old.
for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no.
Because, like, I don't know. Now I kind of want to Google that because I thought he was roughly the same age as me. Oh. There it is. Hold on. Where does... It might not be. Let's see. He's 37. Okay. He might have started at 17. And he's slightly older than me. That means I'm old. This is more of a I feel bad for me thing now.
With all of that being said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here. It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game.
I think you shouldn't be able to buy a live service game. Just make it a monthly subscription. Make it clear that way. Make it $1 a month. Or like do it as like you're not buying a game, you're buying a lifetime subscription to this service.
You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license to that game.
Nope, don't call it a game. It's a service. It's not a game, it's a service.
Reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game.
The license to that service needs to be revoked anytime you're cheating while using the service. It's not just legally chop the word game off of it.
And damaging the play experience of other players. While this is written in the TOS and the EULA, it's usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant...
Point of sale is the only thing that matters. That you don't pay in the terms of service. You pay at the point of sale.
TOS in front of you, and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it.
That's because they're 59, 60 pages long to start. Like, the terms of service... That... You ought to have read the entire terms of service to know that this company was going to screw you over. That just... Let's just make that not an option. Like, isn't that a better world to live in where that just can't happen because we're very clear up front?
At point of sale, it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either leasing or purchasing a license or anything along those lines, that you're not actually buying the game directly. I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of
that would. That's one portion of it, though. The rest of it, let's fix that problem.
What they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in. That makes a lot more sense to me than
that they didn't realize they were engaging in because it's deceptive. It's deceptive on purpose.
Force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days,
So this is the newest video where he also addresses all the pirate software stuff. So we're going to skip a lot. I just want to go over some of the intro part here where he explains what it is again. And this will kind of be where we end on.
I'm coming at you a little bit like a time traveler would. It'll make sense in a minute.
Sure.
As a refresher, Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement to stop publishers from effectively destroying video games they have already sold to customers.
Games that have already been sold to customers. Okay, that seems very in line with what I was saying. It's not about lifetime services. It's about games that were sold to customers.
Now, we've gone about this in many ways, but it's easiest to divide this up by things we've already done and things we can still do, because there's about a dozen things we've already done. Yeah, in fact, here's a list if you want to pause this.
So, submitting complaints, submitting petitions, making contact with an EU commission, complaint, more complaints. And actually, we looked at all these earlier. They're either ongoing or no response or died already.
Going over this again will be a video in itself. I'll talk more about some of this towards the end. So that just leaves things we can still do, which are only 2 items. One is for the UK to sign a government petition to bring this issue before Parliament.
Which is what this was. This petition. Which is now at, it needs 1 million signatures. Of only people in the EU.
Parliament. Though, keeping it real, I'm not terribly optimistic about this one, since the government response has been a mess by every definition. It's a long and boring story, but the short version is it's hit a bureaucratic roadblock and will stay stuck unless it gets more signatures. But the one that has a lot of power, so much so I think it could change the course of gaming history, is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, I said I'm approaching this like a time travel.
I lied. I sent the link to the second one, the European Citizens Initiative. The first one is that's something different. This is the one that needs 1 million signatures, and this is the one that they're going on.
Because with the trajectory we're on, these are both going to fail. So I figure, why wait until they actually do to tell people? Both the petitions end in July. The Citizens Initiative in particular on July 31st. This video probably won't change the timeline. It's just a last-ditch attempt to wake people up on it.
So, yeah, anybody in the EU, if you want to make sure that games aren't destroyed, go sign that. You only need like less than 400,000 more signatures by the end of the month. This was down at like 400,000 though before this video a week ago.
The European Citizens Initiative failing kind of stings. Again, this one is crazy powerful, but the hurdle we just couldn't get past was that it requires 1 million signatures from citizens of EU countries, and we've only made it just under halfway. That's really too bad, because I have high confidence this would have solved the problem of publishers destroying video games.
It still could.
What a lot of people don't realize is that in the EU especially, it's almost a state of lawlessness regarding the practice of game destruction. Okay, I don't want to put people to sleep here, but the quick legal argument is that the vast majority of games with an online requirement say they can be terminated at any time for any reason.
And sometimes no reason.
Or Blizzard likes to say any or no reason.
There you go.
But according to the EU Commission...
This is what I was talking about earlier too. Prohibits unfair terms causing a significant imbalance in the parties' rights and obligations if they're a detriment to the customer. You can't force people to agree to things that are just universally bad for them.
That might be a violation of Directive 93/13 EEC, which protects consumers against unfair terms in consumer contracts. So if that term is unfair,
there you go.
That means that part of the contract is null and void. And if it's null and void, then what does the law say about how long your purchase lasts? Well, it doesn't. That's the whole mess.
That makes
if there
sense.
are no legal guidelines, what are consumer expectations for how long video
there
games
are none.
last? Well, indefinitely. Even the average online multiplayer video games from the 90s can still work today if you didn't change the hardware or software.
Very true. And games used to work this way, but they were... I get that things are more complicated now, but this comes down to, again, just release a server that people can run. And we're talking about end of life after the game's over. And unless it's a live service game where people are paying to play it, you still need a copy of the game. And the server really isn't making you any money.
So the law wasn't written for this situation. The industry's terms might possibly be illegal. And traditional expectations are games last indefinitely. Now, of course, publishers can't
Yep.
support games indefinitely, but by not giving expiration dates or end of life plans, that might be the situation they've put themselves in. I cannot emphasize enough what a mess this is. If you were an impartial judge just trying to interpret the law, you'd have a headache. I don't know what you would do. You'd probably tell the EU Commission they need to make a law on this because this
Yeah.
is a glaring omission.
I would
So being
say.
in the middle of this quagmire right now, if we had rolled up with 1 million signatures demanding that the EU give us basic consumer rights for video games, that would have been the easy way out for regulators, because then they would have a mandate. That's what I meant about my half-joke slide about politicians liking easy wins.
Yeah, like this is a law that would pass in the EU for sure. Like they're so much more consumer friendly than North America.
This situation is such a mess that trying to settle this under existing law is more work than creating laws under a consumer mandate.
Yeah.
And thanks to the action we've pushed at consumer protection agencies, doing nothing is no longer an option for multiple countries. We've made sure of that. But none of that matters because the initiative is failing. Now, my original thought was that ironically, it's difficult to get.
Yeah, so it is failing. They only have till the end of the month to get like 320,000 signatures. I believe that's all I really wanted to cover. Let's see, where's the media coverage? Oh, here we go. Let's see the
Now, I have been maybe fairly criticized for not running a
critique
fundraiser.
suggestions.
There are reasons for that.
Let's see.
The first is, until recently, I didn't know where we would spend it. People would say
Fair enough.
buy ads, but the
Buy
initiative could be
ads.
considered political. And YouTube
Yep.
doesn't allow political ads in a lot of EU countries, and neither does Twitch. Good
Mhm.
luck reaching gamers without YouTube or Twitch. So taking money with no plan, that's a grift. And another reason is I am one of the worst people to manage that sort of thing. Financial
There you go.
paperwork
Fair
is an
enough.
Achilles heel of mine and seems to take me 10 times more effort than anything else. I mean, I can do accounting, budgeting, math. That's not a problem. No, I mean having knowledge of all the obscure forms you need to fill out, what all the tax laws that apply are, what all the specialized terminology
Yeah,
is,
fair enough.
and just all the hidden rules. Now, you might say just hire an international tax accountant for multiple countries. Okay, there goes a third of our funding then. So what are we even doing? I cannot emphasize how much I struggle with financial business crap like that.
Fair enough. Here we go. Common pit. Let's see.
And that's from people who support the campaign.
This is what I really
For
want.
all the support and fair coverage we've received,
The common
there's been
opposition
some
arguments.
opposition too.
I want to hear these.
Though I want to say 80, maybe even 90% of people who are against the initiative are against it because they think it's doing something it's not. For example,
Fair enough.
the number one criticism about the initiative that we've never been able to shake is that it's unworkable because you can't expect publishers to support games forever.
Wow. Wonder who said that.
Yeah, we know. That's why we've never asked for that. I must have said this 100 times now.
We heard
It
that
was
earlier.
written on the website from day one, but this keeps coming up over and over again. See, that's the thing. As soon as you say 3 words on requiring end-of-life plans, gamers especially will jump to some conclusion, and I never know where they're going to land. Ironically, non-gamers tend to be much better at understanding the initiative because they're not coming with a whole bag full of assumptions. A couple other criticisms are how this would violate copyright law by forcing
What?
publishers to give up their intellectual property. No, it wouldn't. Some of you may want to
There you
pause
go.
this part.
The customer would have no additional rights beyond what they were sold in the first place. The ability to run a copy of the publisher's game. The only difference would be now the publisher would no longer be able to permanently revoke the license without fault from the customer. Because the initiative focuses exclusively on outcome, a working game, and not a methodology for doing so, source code, server binary, specific files, no specific demands for any intellectual property have been made. Exactly. Like I said, that's not, you're not even demanding that, even though that would be an easier solution. This leaves full discretion in the publishers and how they want to manage it. Yeah, you don't have to give away your intellectual property. Just don't sell me something that I can't use. Again, if I'm paying for a service that expires at the end of the month, then that's what I'm paying for. If I buy access to that service for a lifetime amount of time until it's revoked, sure, just don't call it a game. Don't say I'm purchasing a game.
Or how this won't work because of end user license agreements. That's also not a problem.
The initiative would still work regardless of what terms are stated in the EULA, since if passed, it would become an EU directive which would supersede. Yeah, there you go. You can't, like, I don't think a lot of people realize that if there's a bug there. I don't know if people realize that, like, if somebody puts something in a contract that's illegal and you sign it, the contract's not legally binding you to something that's illegal. That part's just not part of the contract.
Problem. Or how this isn't possible because publishers already have agreements with other companies and don't have the rights to distribute that code. We're aware of that. Yes, the initiative is still possible.
The terms of the initiative would be possible regardless if a pre-existing deals with publishers that might conflict with it because it's not retroactive. There you go. So it's not retroactive. If passed, it would not go into effect until likely years from now, at least, because they'd have to do a lot of research, giving publishers time to make new deals for future games. Existing games where these terms... For existing games where these terms would not be possible, there are multiple options, but only the EU Commission could make the final decision. Shutting down the game before the directive goes into effect could be an option. Exempt existing games is another option.
Those are the ones I've seen most organically. Beyond that, there is a clear patient zero where others come from. Okay, I really don't want to do this next part, but it's become a lot.
We already reviewed the Pirate Software videos. Let's see here. I'm just going to... I forgot my mic wasn't on that scene. We are going to end the stream here. Yeah, I had seen a little bit of those Pirate Software videos and I was like, that's not what's being asked for. So maybe I should watch them and give some alternative perspective from someone who does know stuff about software. I'm not saying that he doesn't. He clearly knows stuff about software, but that's not at all correct. Like, you don't have to solve it that way. You don't have to do that. Oh, hey, thanks for coming out. We normally stream on another channel now called Dungeons and Downloads. We're live there right now too, actually, on YouTube. That's where I spend most of my time now. I just figured I'd throw this here in case I get really screwed. I didn't want to do this on the Twitch account for Dungeons and Downloads because I don't know. I was like, well, what if they give us a ban or something stupid? The YouTube, they'll just mute it or tell us that we can't make money on it. That's fine. What am I doing here? I'm going to the channel. That's where I'm going. We stream D&D twice a week for the most part, and we upload videos when we get around to it. What's the next one coming out? I guess there'd be another Kirby Superstar coming out on Wednesday. What's the last video we put out? Let's double check. Oh, did I lie? When's that come out? 29. Wait. That's not scheduled yet. Gaming on a Budget. A game about digging a hole. That came out 3 days ago. That was pretty good. Elden Ring Randomizer. Oh yeah, we played through Castle Crashers not that long ago. That was fun. Yeah, that's where we mostly hang out now. If we look at our lives there, this is currently streaming there. But other than that, we pretty much only stream D&D. other than me wanting to look at a bit more of this stop killing games stuff. Oh, nice. We were doing Twitch for a while, and then Twitch got like really weird. Maybe it's just a me thing, but I feel like Twitch got real weird real fast. It just seems like it's mostly all IRL streamers all the time now. Which, I mean, okay. Yeah. That's what we're mostly doing now. We're mostly just recording offline and uploading to YouTube. We've got a separate channel that we're uploading all the D&D stuff to. We've found some pretty cool ways to play D&D online and make it like not terrible for recording. We can make like individual, depending on which table we're playing at, sometimes we give everybody like separate scenes in OBS specific to their views and stuff, which is kind of cool. Yeah, mostly D&D. A ton of D&D. For a while we were playing like 4 times a week. It was ridiculous. Okay, I'm actually leaving now. Goodbye, everybody.